All right, so now we're going to be moving into factoring trinomials. Okay, trinomials, basically there's three terms. For the first four questions, my leading coefficient, so my first number should be a 1. Okay, so my first number should be a 1. So let's take a look. And this actually, you guys are going to like this. It's going to be pretty simple. Now, let me do an X thing here. And I'm going to say I'm looking for two specific numbers. Now, the interesting about these two specific numbers is that when I multiply them, it's going to equal to -10. And I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied is equal to -10. But when I add my numbers, it's going to equal to +3. Now, you might be wondering, where did I get these values from? Right here, there's a -3 and there's a +3. So multiplied has to equal to -10, but when I add my numbers, has to equal to +3. Okay, so one thing, multiplication, because the multiplication is negative, I know my signs are different. So one of them is going to be positive, one of them is going to be negative. So in reality, I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied equals 10, but when I subtract equals 3, right? I subtract when the signs are different. So let me think of the factors of 10. 1 times 10. Does that work? No, it doesn't work. So my list, I'm going to create my list. On my left, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 until it works, right? Till something works. Now, can I think of 2 times something equals 10, right? Yeah, 2 times 5. Now, think about this. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply will equal to -10. When I add them, it's equal to +3. Okay, so this works, right? 2 times 5 is 10. When I subtract is 3. So I'm going to say my numbers that I'm looking for is +5, -2. Okay, now on my answer, I'm going to put two parentheses. One of them is going to end with a +5, and the other parenthesis is going to end with a -2. You guys can see where I got the +5 and the -2 from. Now, the way they're going to start, I take a look at my exponent here. My first term is x to the 4th. Okay. Now, I have to cut my exponent in half. So you got to think of what's the half of 4. So my parentheses in this case is going to start with x to the 2nd and x to the 2nd. So that means if my first exponent was x to the 6, I would have split it as x to the 3 and x to the 3. Now, if my exponent is x to the 2nd to begin with, I just split it as x and x. Okay, let's take a look at here. I said that for the beginning, my first number was going to be a 1. In this case, it is not. So what I'm going to do, let me divide everything by 2. Let me factor out a 2. I'm going to do parentheses. So that's going to give me x to the 4th plus 11x squared plus 10. I'm going to factor out a 2. So now, if you look at the parentheses, my first number is a 1. Okay, so I'm going to do my parentheses, my x here. I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply it is equal to 10, but when I add my numbers is 11. I start thinking of the factors of 10. Two numbers that multiplied equals 10, but when I add is 11. I'm going to say, well, 1 and 10, right? 1 times 10 is 10. 1 plus 10 is 11. So my parentheses, one of them is going to finish with a +1, and the other parenthesis is going to finish with a +10. I look at my exponent, x to the 4th. What's the half of 4? Well, 2, right? So my exponents here, they're going to be x to the 2nd. Now my answer here will have a 2 at the beginning. Because I divided everything by a 2 to begin with, that is a factor, so don't forget it. right? We factor the common factor out first, so that's still factored. Let's take a look at number 44. Let me do my X here. I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied is equal to negative 30 when I add is equal to 1. And I'm going to say, well, positive 6, negative 5. So my parentheses, one of them is going to finish with a plus 6. The other one's going to finish with a minus 5. Exponent-wise, I see x to the 4th to begin with. So I'm going to have x to the 2nd. I have to cut it in half. Now here, let me divide everything by 3 to begin with. So I have x to the 4th minus 10x squared plus 16. Right, I divided everything by 3. So let me do my x thing here at the side. I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied equals 16, but when I add my numbers is equal to negative 10. All right, because the multiplication is a positive 16, that means the signs are the same. And when I add is negative, so I mean, I'm dealing with two negative signs here. Let me think of the factors of 16. I go 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 3 is not a factor, 4 times 4. Notice how on the left side I was increasing by 1, right? 1, 2, 3 didn't quite work, so 4. So remember, I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied equals 16, but when I add is 10. So I'm looking at negative 2, negative 8. So my parentheses, let me do here. One of them is going to finish with a minus 2, the other one's going to finish with a minus 8. When it comes to x, I have x to the 4th. Remember, I got to cut that in half. So I'm going to have x to the 2nd and x to the 2nd. And don't forget the 3 on the front. Now, from the two parentheses, which one comes first? It doesn't matter. Right? As long as you have both, the order does not matter. Now, the problem would be, what if, okay, so now I'm going to go, what if my first number is not a 1? First thing we think is like, oh, can I divide everything by 6? No, we cannot. Right? 13 divided by 6, nothing we can do. Right? So now this case, we're going to see why we did by grouping yesterday. Now in this case, let me do my X thing here. My numbers will have to add 13. I'm looking for two numbers. They will have to add to 13. You guys can see where I got the positive 13 from. Now, when I multiply my numbers, they're going to multiply to negative 378. Whoa, where did that 378 come from? Okay, so we'll see. 6 times a negative 63. Right, I multiply those two numbers. Okay, so I'm looking for two numbers. I know they're going to be positive and negative because multiplication is negative. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiplied equals 378, but when I subtract them is equal to 13. Let me find the factors of 378. Right, what numbers multiplied equals to 378? I'm going to say, well, 1 times 378. But when I subtract those, it's not 13. All right, how about 2? Well, 378 divided by 2 is 189. So then I'm going to say 1 times 189 is 378. But when I subtract those numbers, it's not 13, so it doesn't work. How about 3? So let's see, 378 divided by 3 is 126. So I know that 3 times 126 is 378. But when I subtract those numbers, it's not 13. Okay, so we got to try again. Believe me, it is going to eventually work. How about 4? 378 divided by 4 is the decimal. Okay, so that doesn't work then. How about 5? 378 divided by 5 gives me a decimal. Okay, so that doesn't work. How about 6? 378 divided by 6 is 63. Okay, our numbers are getting smaller. When I subtract those two, it's not 13 still, so I keep on trying. How about 7? I get 7 times 54. That doesn't work yet. How about 8? 378 divided by 8 is a decimal. Nope. How about 9? I get 9 times 42. When I subtract this, it's still not 13, so gotta continue. 378 divided by 10 doesn't work. 378 divided by 11 gives me a decimal, so it doesn't work. Divided by 12, it doesn't work. Divided by 13, it doesn't work. Divided by 14, I get 27. So I get that 14 times 27 is 378. Now, 27 minus 14 is 13, right? I said eventually was going to work. So I'm good to work now. So now this is what we're going to do, okay? Because the first number is not a 1, I don't go straight to parentheses. Instead, I'm going to split the middle term, right? So I'm going to go 6m to the 4th. Now in here, basically it's going to be negative 14, positive 27, right? Because I want it to be positive 13. So now I'm going to split the middle term. I'm going to split it as negative 14 m squared plus 27 m squared minus 63. All right, from 3 terms, I went to 4 terms. I split the middle term. Okay, so you might be wondering, why did I do this? Because yesterday I learned how to factor when there's 4 terms. I want to look at the first 2 terms only. 6 and 14, I can divide each by 2. Letter-wise, m to the second. So divide each by 2 and take 2 from each m. That's going to give me 3m squared minus 7. Ooh, okay. Now, looking at the last 2 terms, 27 and 63, I can divide each by 9. And that's going to give me 3m squared minus 7. So my factors are going to be 3m squared minus 7 and 2m squared plus 9. Okay. Notice how I do my x thing to be able to how I'm going to split my middle term. I split my middle term so I get 4 terms, and then I do by grouping, which is what we learned yesterday. Okay, so now here, let's take a look. My numbers, they must add to a negative 28, and they must multiply to 75. Negative 28, you guys see where I get this from. My 75, because I multiply my first and last term, 15 times 5. Right, my first number times my last number, 15 times 5 gave me 75. Okay, so I know I'm going to be dealing with 2 negatives. All right, because multiplication is positive, so the signs are the same. Okay, so let's see what are the factors of 75. And I'm going to think 1 times 75. Does 2 work? No. How about 3? 3 times 25. Okay, now 3 times 25 is 75. And then 3 plus 25 is 28. So I'm going to be dealing with these numbers. Nice. Okay, so now let me split my middle term, right? So I'm going to have 15 x to the fourth minus 3x to the second minus 25 x to the second plus 5. When I look at the first two terms, I can divide them by 3x squared. And that's going to give me 5x squared minus 1. When I look at the last two terms, I can divide it each by a negative 5. And that's going to give me 5x squared minus 1. So my factors are going to be 5x squared minus 1 and 3x squared minus 5. Beautiful. Now 48. 16, 52, 90. I think we can make it a little bit smaller to begin with if I divide everything by 2. Okay, so 2. So it's going to give me 8x to the fourth minus 26x to the second minus 45. Okay, so have that. Let me open up some room here. Okay, so when I do my diamond thing, my X thing, oops. I'm looking for two numbers that when I add is a negative 26, but when I multiplied, let's see, what's 8 times 45? They equal to 360. So let me find out what are the factors of 360. My numbers are going to be one positive, one negative because multiplication is negative. So let's see, 1 times 360. So I'm really looking for two numbers that multiplied equals 360, but when I subtract them, it's equal to 26. Okay, so this one doesn't work. About 2 times 180. Yeah, 2 times 180 is 360, but when I subtract them, it's not 26. Okay, so about 3. I have 3 times 120. And that when I subtract them is not 26. How about 4? I have 4 times 90. And it still doesn't work. How about 5? See, 360 divided by 5 is 72. So I know 5 times 72 is 360. Okay, so 5 times 72 is 360, but when I subtract, it's not 26. Okay, so how about 6? 6 times 60. Still doesn't work. How about 7? 360 divided by 7 gives me a decimal, so nah, it doesn't work. How about 8? I have 8 times 45. But 45 minus 8 is not 26, so okay, I continue. How about 9? 9 times 40. 40 minus 9 is not 26. Okay, how about 10? 10 times 36. Okay, now this one works because 36 minus 10 is 26. So I want positive 10 and negative 36. So I'm just looking at my parentheses, right? 8x to the fourth minus 26x squared minus 45. Let me split that. Let me break that. Let me write that as 8x to the fourth plus 10x squared minus 36x squared minus 45. Notice how I split the middle term. Okay, so looking at the first two terms, 8 and 10, I can divide each by 2. And then I can remove an x squared out. So that's going to give me 4x squared plus 5. Now looking at the last two terms, let me divide each by a negative 9. So it's going to give me 4x squared plus 5. So my parentheses would be 4x squared plus 5, 2x squared minus 9. But my answer, let me not forget my 2 from the beginning. Remember, I divided everything by 2 to begin with, so let me not forget that 2. Let's take a look at question number 49. Now, in this case, let me divide everything by 3. I'm going to make my numbers smaller. So 20x to the 4th plus 11x squared. Now, 135 divided by 3 is 45. So I'm looking at my diamond. I'm looking at two numbers that multiplied is a negative 900, but when I add is 11. Negative 900 because I multiplied 20 times a negative 45. Okay, so let me find my factors of 900. Let me start with 9 times 100. 10 times 90. Now 900 divided by 11 doesn't work. 900 divided by 12 is 12 times 75. But they don't subtract to 11, so I continue. 900 divided by 13 doesn't work. 900 divided by 14 doesn't work. Now 900 divided by 15 is 60. So, but when I subtract, it's not 11. Okay, so I continue. 900 divided by 16, it doesn't work because I get a decimal. Divided by 17, it doesn't work. Divided by 18, I get 18 times 50. But 50 minus 18 is not 11, so I continue. Let's see, 900 divided by 19, it doesn't work. 900 divided by 20 is 45. So that means that 20 times 45. But when I subtract this, I don't get it 11, so I continue. 900 divided by 21 doesn't work. Divided by 22 doesn't work. Divided by 23, it doesn't work. Divided by 24 doesn't work. Now divided by 25, I get 36. So that means that 25 times 36 is 900, but subtracted is 11, so that's good. So I'm going to call this negative 25, positive 36. All right, so I'm going to split my middle term. Again, I'm just focused on my parentheses. So I have 20x to the 4th minus 25x squared plus 36x squared minus 45. Notice I split my middle term. I'm looking at the first two terms. Okay, 20 and 25, I can divide each by 5 and then remove x squared out of each. So it's going to give me 4x squared minus 5. Looking at the last two terms, 36 and 45, I can divide each by 9, by a positive 9. It's going to give me, let's see, 4x squared minus 5. So my parentheses will be 4x squared minus 5. 5x squared plus 9. And let me not forget that 3 from the beginning, because I divided everything by 3. Okay, let me zoom out. That way you guys can see what we did today.